Narayani, a tale for Arthur Avalon. The power who exists on all beings as shadow, reverence to her, reverence to her, reverence to her. The power who exists in all beings as sleep, reverence to her, reverence to her, reverence to her. The power who exists in all beings as illusion, reverence to her, reverence to her, reverence to her. The power who exists in all beings as peace, reverence to her, reverence to her, reverence to her. The power who exists in all beings as mother, reverence to her, reverence to her, reverence to her. Devi Mahatma. The man stood on the deck of the boat, watching the green sail of the swamp unfurling to the horizon. The wind creaked in the rigging, and the sail flapped occasionally on an errant breeze. His mind flitted back over the past 2 days, when he had come sailing up the storm-flecked bay to find refuge in the arms of this brown river of silence. It was probably the first time that the river had hosted a white man. He stood there on his boat, his buckled shoe hooked on the rail, listening to the cicadas sing in the torpid afternoon silence. Kingfishers erupted in electric blue shards from the Stygian heart of the swamp. Footsteps on deck walked into his reveries. His first mate had arrived. He was an ebony-complexioned man, with honey-colored eyes, and a smile which trembled between innocence and cupidity. "Who lives here?" he inquired, sweeping his arms over the metallic green of the swamp. The man was silent, and the captain became aware of a reluctance on the part of the native to divulge any information. But the white man persisted doggedly. "Who are the native people of this place?" The mate brooded over the empty landscape and finally answered evasively, "Oh well, there are lots of folks who have their homes here. There are the herons who live by the Jheels further inland. They stalk the rushes growing by the river for the bounty of fish to be found there. Then there are the wild geese who come by late October, barheads and greylags, mallards and pintails. They are all here. They feast on the worms and mollusks which abound in the estuary. These creatures fuel them with the energy to fly across the Himalayas on their return journey to Mongolia and Siberia. This is also the home of the crocodile and water monitor, the snake, the turtle, and of course the kingfishers. This is the abode of the kingfisher." The captain felt he was being gently sidetracked, and the mate was not telling him all. "But what about the people who live in the swamp?" "The drummers are the only people who live in the swamp. But then no one has ever set eyes on them. We have only heard them by twilight." How is it that no one has seen them? Parried the white man. I'm sure many an explorer before me would have walked into the swamp looking for them and finally encountered one. I'm sure they would know the whole story. You don't understand, sir, the mate replied gently. No one who had gone in search of the drummers of the swamp has returned to tell the tale. Why then, were they killed? Asked the white man aggressively. Are these tribals in the forest hostile? Oh no, sir. This is not a tale of death and violence. It is very simple. Those who went searching for the drummers never came back because they chose not to return. But why did they not want to return? The captain was importunate. But this time the boatman did not answer. His inscrutable gaze was fixed on the swamp, watching the cormorants scudding across the green. The shrill cry of a fishing eagle rained down from a cloudless blue sky. The fiery orb of the sun was beginning to slip down into the marshes. The captain was getting ready to leave, and there was a finality in his movements. I am going to sort out this mystery tonight. I am going into the swamp to look for the drummers. Will you accompany me? He finally asked the mate. Only up to a certain point, sir, he replied, beyond which you must tread alone. Why? Asked the captain. Why can't you accompany me beyond the mystery of this perimeter? The mate watched him, a look akin to pity on his ebony countenance. I don't want to go because I want to return. Return to this, he cried, his arm a sweeping arc encompassing the river, the sky, the swamp, and the humpback sea which waited beyond. Evening was falling on the swamp. Huge flocks of whistling teal were returning home, their calls announcing the oncoming twilight. An early moon was ascendant on the east. Pintails streamed across the face of the moon. The man heard it first, a steady throb, rising and falling in the dying light. The drums were beating in the swamp. Can you hear them? They have started. The white man exclaimed, his voice guttural with excitement. Come with me, he cried, pulling the mate by the wrist. Come where the drums are beating. The mate followed hesitantly, followed the man where the petals of the unconscious were opening. The marsh glimmered in the moonlight. All around, waterfowl were rising to the moon in a whir of wings, and all around were the drums, beating out a tattoo of sound, singing to the fingers of some unseen Merlin of the marshes. The man ran in headlong pursuit of the sound. He looked back for the boatman, but there was no one following him anymore. But by then, he had forgotten all that he had been born with, forgotten the boat and the boatman, the brown-backed river and the turquoise-bosomed sea. All he remembered were the drums and the sound blossoming in his head. He burst into a clearing where the water hyacinth rose quietly, where 1,000 lotuses with 1,000 petals were opening softly in the moonlight, and where the deity stood in the lake, growing taller and taller into the night sky as the heavens turned away. He watched her standing, immaculate amongst the lilies. There were no drummers here, only she, the sound without origins, the unstruck sound. The boatman stood on the deck as the sun rose over the swamp. Flocks of black ibis were flying out to sea. He gave orders to weigh anchor. He knew his captain would never return. They left him to sail away to the sea which awaited them, humped in silence.